Now, this is a Vedanta series question and answer. And normally, when you ask somebody, do you have any questions, in the context of what could be a talk or something like that, uh, people tend to then think, and they can't think, and during the process of a talk, maybe they can think of a question to ask. But it's significant that in many of the scriptures, for example, the Ashtavakra Samhita, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, questions are being answered. In fact, there's a whole Upanishad dedicated to questions. It's called Prashna Upanishad. 6 questions are there. And we've studied that previously. We could study it again in a series if you like. But Sister Nivedita, maybe that's a subject we should pick up since her birthday is in a few days' time. Of course, it's her solar birthday, not the lunar birthday. And many people get a little confused because, sometimes there are different times of the year and sometimes a month away, because of the lunar arrangement. The Jewish tradition, Muslim tradition, Hindu tradition, all of them follow the lunar arrangement. Maybe even Jainism follow the lunar arrangement. But in the Western countries, we are very used to following the solar arrangement. And so, Sister Nivedita's birth. Now, I won't be an island for it. So but previously we had a meeting up there in Dungannon. And these meetings are really how we founded the Area Vedanta Society. Because a small nucleus of interested people, even here on these online talks, there are only a handful of people. Even before COVID, there were just a handful of people. But we at least had a dozen people maybe on a Sunday, same thing amount on a Tuesday, something like that. And was that satisfactory? Absolutely satisfactory. Because of all the people in the world, not many people are interested in the subject of Vedanta. And why is that? Well, it's because the world in front, it occupies their attention so much. Not only that, but beyond the immediate world in front, we have all kinds of news reports coming in of various things that are happening in the world, and none of them are really particularly optimistic. In fact, optimism doesn't sell. So, what inspires a Sister Nivedita or any other type of person like that, who has such a remarkable impact beyond the scope of her immediate environment? Immediate environment, Northern Ireland. Immediate environment, family. Immediate environment, the town of Dungannon that hasn't really changed so much, really. Not the central part of it. The street on which she was born and probably lived for a few years. It hasn't changed that much. You can still identify it as it was in her time, 1867. So we have to put in some extra thing that a person is responding to and willing to respond to something. Some urgent call, some inner urge, some unfolding. And unfolding is generally how we describe the term evolution. Evolution, not something that comes from nowhere or something that has a mystery to it or something that takes a long period of time depending on a mysterious thing called natural selection, but literally an unfolding. And I often use the example, I fold up a piece of paper and say, okay, here it is, now let's unfold it. What happened? What was the thing that was new? Nothing was new. It was still the same piece of paper. A totality. In fact, I joke, how can I believe in evolution when I believe in totality? And I often give the example of the fact that we are dimensionally deficient. We think that we are in full possession of our faculties, that our world is everything. But actually, when you analyze it very carefully, you'll see we see hardly anything of the totality. And the more we look into what is nature, what is the reality of being, and so on and so forth, the more we realize how much we do not know. For example, you look out into the universe through the infrared telescope or the James Webb, you'll see some galaxy which is something like 13.5 billion years old. And it's purported that the universe itself started 13.8 billion years ago. Clearly, something's wrong. It took some time, according to the normal sense of evolution. A long time is necessary. Small progressive changes are necessary, according to the theory of evolution, not only in cosmology, but also in biology. But we see that that's not the case. Something inward is driving something forward. And our obvious example would be a seed that unfolds into a tree, becomes a tree. And what we notice is not all trees are the same. And so Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras picks this up very clearly and says, good and bad deeds are not the direct causes of transformations. And then the commentary goes something like a big body of water standing there. How do you transfer it beyond its restrictions? Well, you open up the gates, the thing flows through by itself. Now, they didn't have an enormous amount of water in mind, probably, the commentators. They envisaged maybe small channels developed by farmers to get water to their fields. And they realized that water can be controlled by having small channels and having blockages, small dams, if you will. And you can open one gate and the water flows in. You don't have to give an instruction to the water, please this way, please that way. The water has an inherent quality of flowing. It knows how to flow. And it'll take the easiest path. So if you take evolution in this sense, something is unfolding. Now, our Vedanta philosophy says we can identify what it is that is unfolding. The thing that is unfolding is the totality, restricted by time and space and causation. And we notice just a small localized version of it because we are dimensionally deficient. If you look at the James Webb telescope and so on, we can only get information through the infrared. But we don't have infrared vision. So it is interpreted to conform to our senses, our sense organs. Now, for our purpose, our sense organs are not the eyes, the ears, and so on and so forth. No doubt these are necessary, an interlink between the inside world and the outside world. But the outside world is presenting itself in such a way that the organs, the internal organs, internally, will have to take that information, transcribe it, so that we can identify there's a floor, there's a ceiling, there's a chair, there's a person, there's a teenager chewing gum, and so on. How do we get to that arrangement of the teenager chewing gum? Well, inside it, says Vedanta, the whole totality is there. It's not really unfolding. It's not actually evolving. It only looks like that. And why it looks like that is because we are dimensionally deficient. And if you remember, always give the example of the frogs. The frogs trying to analyze what is a cone, and the professor is lowering a cone in the water. And they are dimensionally deficient because they only have horizontal vision. They don't have vertical vision. Can't say up, can't say down. And so, naturally, being scientifically minded and analyzing this thing called a cone, and I always say don't ask how they manage to be scientists. They're only frogs. So it's only an analogy. So frogs are there waiting and they start their clock watches. Yes, in the beginning, Mr. Cone is a point. Now you can't really measure a point properly, so they accept point is there, it appeared. And as the cone gets lowered more and more in the water, this small point develops. It develops into a circle. A circle is something that we can measure. We can take the dimensions of the circle properly. But we notice we have to be careful about taking the dimensions, because as the seconds are ticking by, this thing is growing. And as it's growing, its pot belly dimension is growing more and more and more and more. And they're recording carefully, making a graph, time versus change. And as they're logging this change, they can hardly keep up with it. But the professor is just gradually lowering it, because evolution is supposed to be on a gradual, progressive basis. Even though our experience in the fossil record is not like that. We have the Cambrian explosion, where many, many things suddenly seem to appear in the fossil record. And so there's some kind of accelerated thing going on there, which is a puzzling thing, because Darwin didn't have that. Darwin's idea was there must be a small series of changes, progressive changes. And those who think about it will not be happy with it, because they'll say these changes seem to have a directional purpose. If you think that they have a directional purpose, in other words, if you think that they have some kind of evolutionary purpose, namely survival, namely natural selection, namely through the response to the environment, number one, and number two, the advantage to the environment for survival, or the advantage to the individual for survival. And how do we measure the survival? We measure it through the organisms which are more successful in their propagation. So we are not that successful, actually, as a human species, because the ants are much more successful. The crocodile is hugely successful. There is a thing which is small, like a bear. It's called a kind of bear. And tiny, tiny organism that has survived almost forever and can survive as well in space. And it looks like a small bear, so it's called something like that. And so why would it survive? Why would it wish to survive? These questions are not addressed. But these are the interesting questions. And Vedanta comes in and says, well, actually it's the totality. The frogs in the example cannot see the entire cone. They can only see small changes. And we can measure these changes over time until eventually the cone has gone. And their interpretation of it is, Mr. Cone was born as a point, something like a cone Big Bang. And then it developed, it inflated more and more and more and more. And eventually at 6 o'clock in the evening, we regret to announce to the whole world, poor Mr. Cone died, but we're going to go back to our laboratory, discuss our horizontal perspective, and see, is it going to reincarnate somewhere? And anybody will understand that in this analogy, a cone is a cone, it's a totality. It was never born, it never changed, it never died. The most common question is, where do we go when we die? Well, if you accept death, it's a problem question. But if you say, well, a totality never dies, there's that peace prayer which we recite, the head of some of the Upanishads, Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamaduchate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnamivavashishyate. This is full and that is full. You can't take fullness from fullness. You can't add to fullness. Full is full. And our world is not like that. It's never full. Our interpretation of the world, if we take it at face value, is always gaps of dissatisfaction. We want to fill it in with something or other. And so we cannot take everything at face value. If we do that, then we cannot solve the most difficult questions that present themselves and have presented themselves from the beginning of time, as it were, in the human psyche. There's a Ashtavakra Samhita, that means the song of Ashtavakra. Ashtavakra said to be through various things. I won't tell you the story about it, but as somebody who is crooked, who not crooked mentally or morally, but somebody who is bent in various places, deformed a little bit. But he has a conversation, and this is the Ashtavakra Samhita, the song of Ashtavakra. So, how is knowledge to be acquired? This was a question. This is Vedanta series, question and answers. The question could be like that. How is knowledge to be acquired? What do we mean by knowledge? So, it is not information. Let's take the frog example in the cone. It is not to say, how can we get the information about the fullness of the cone? Not in terms of we understand what is a cone, but we understand what is the thing which is unchanging. And knowledge here doesn't mean information, it means experiential understanding. Let's go back to the Upanishads, because the Upanishads have been compared to cows. And if we see the meditation of the Gita Dhyan, that's how it arrives. We can imagine the Upanishads are compared to cows. Cows, as we know, are very generous in yielding milk. And Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is compared to the one who is milking the cows, milking the Upanishads, getting the essence out of the Upanishads. And that milk then comes out as the song called Gita. Gita means song. So Arjuna naturally corresponds to the calf that is bringing the milk out. Its contact, like a calf, the contact with the udder makes the milk flow. And we are seekers of that. What? Wisdom. Knowledge in the sense of wisdom, not knowledge in the sense of information. Today, this world is data-based. In other words, the whole approach to knowledge says that there must be data behind it. It must be quantitative. But how do you measure a bucket full of love or a bucket full of anger? It's not measurable in this sense. Qualia, as it has been called, is not measurable. So we are the fortunate ones who drink it. And the first step then in acquiring knowledge will be, well, let us try to see what scriptures have to say, what other people of experience has to say. So, how is knowledge to be acquired is a question that Janaka, who himself an enlightened sage, is asking. Now, Janaka is significant. Why? Because Janaka was a king, and when you study the kingly duties of the ancient days, nobody is busier than a king. Nobody is busier than Janaka. And yet he is a realized sage. Immediately, we can preempt a question often asked. In the midst of all our activities and problems and difficulties in this world, then how do we have time for spiritual life? Thinking that spiritual life, secular life, are two separate things, one divorced from the other, not at all. So, the two types of sages, the administrative type of sage or the working sage, the one who is busy actively, and the contemplative sage. Ashtavakra is a contemplative sage. Janaka is an administrative sage. How is liberation to be attained? Second question. And there are similar questions. Liberation from what? Is it liberation from working, liberation from colleagues, liberation from difficulties? And so? No. In a sense, It is liberation from pain and our reaction and the cycle of birth and rebirth that comes along with it. The understanding or misunderstanding, there's a gap in me that constantly has to be fulfilled from the outside. And so, as long as we are looking outwardly, we are not looking to the source inwardly, and our attention gets diverted naturally. So, how is liberation to be attained? And how is dispassion to be reached? Now, if we take our analogy of the frog, we realize these questions, which are valid, shift in their significance when we understand things from the point of view of totality, because the cone never changed. Our perception of the cone changed. The fullness never changed. How do we get knowledge? By looking at the totality, learning how to see the totality. How can we be liberated? How can that be attained? It's not to be attained. We are already free. We just don't know it. We are assuming that we are trapped, like a bird in a gilded cage. There's a song like that. And then the third question, how is dispassion to be reached? Why do we require dispassion? Because when we see the source of all our pain, it comes down to this attachment. The greatest pain that we can identify, as I say very often, would be the pain of bereavement. Now, the pain of bereavement or departing, one person departing, leaving many people behind with memories and sorrows and regrets. But somebody who understands this birth, life, death cycle and understands this totality of everything will never ask that question, but how do we acquire that? How do we get that sense of detachment or dispassion? Is it that we have to be cold-hearted? Is it that we have to cut off our compassion? Is it that we become absolutely clinical? No, you're no better then than a data accumulating machine, AI. So if you're seeking liberation, comes the answer, and he's summarizing the whole thing as liberation, then shun the objects of the senses like poison. Now, that's an extreme position. It's a position that was taken by certain sects. It's a position that we could be critical of, because our Vedanta philosophy, in its totality, in its fullness, and since Ramakrishna, who emphasized this, that there are two sides of a coin. There's the eternal, the nitya, and then there is the lila. Why do we want to abandon the lila? Well, we should never abandon the lila, but if we are not thinking of it as a play, if we're not thinking of it as a manifestation of the divine, then of course our attachment comes about. And so shun the objects, or the objects of the senses, like poison means, that don't interpret them as the most significant thing that you have, because if you indulge fully in it and nothing else, then it will be like poison to you. It'll poison the mind. Let's take, for example, you take a fancy to a certain food, loaded, let's say, with sugar. And you say, well, it's very tasty. And while tasting it, more and more and more, getting attached to it, making it an indispensable thing for you, then at some point or other, this puzzling disease may come called diabetes. And you wonder, how did this arrive? And you go to a doctor, and the doctor says, what was your diet? Oh, I just had sweetmeats and sugar. Ah, okay. And what was your weight? It was like this. And what is your weight now? Ah, okay. But the whole body isn't designed for that. You understand that? So we are poisoning the body. And various substances are poisoning our body. Statistically, in so-called developed countries, there's a great deal of obesity present. I'm not sure what the latest the statistics are, but I certainly think it's something like 40-something% of all people in the United States of America have this obesity problem. So we should shun the senses if the objects are poisonous to us. We make that qualification. Then we have to do some practice. What is it? Practice tolerance. That's the first thing on the list. Sincerity, compassion, contentment, truthfulness, like nectar. You are neither earth, water, fire, air, or even ether. None of these 5 fundamental sources. Now, some people will say that's a very old-fashioned kind of chemistry. Not really. The ancient scientists understood that there were these 5 things that were developed that have not only a substantive aspect to it, like a wave system or a field, but they also have an energy. And broadly speaking, we can call this agasha.
Sorry, excuse me, Swami. Sorry, just on there when you were saying about being touched when somebody dies, like,
Yes.
I mean, the pain is just so unbearable. I mean, how do you, like, how do you, just not be attached? It's very, very difficult, especially with children and family and.
Yes.
Even an animal, even. I mean, I had 2 dogs and 2 of them died, but I mean, the pain was just unbearable.
So that's a really good question because it's a common question. It's a question that more or less everybody asks. Firstly, that is the most severe pain that we know of is bereavement. But then what is the cause of it? The cause of it is attachment. How do we become detached? That's your question, basically. Well, we have to revalue everything. First of all, when something dies, is it a huge surprise? For many people, it is. And the paradox is, but we really know that everything dies. There's a cycle. Things are born, things live, and they die. And a good question is a question that maybe the Buddhists are keen to answer in terms of meditation. Meditation on death is a wonderful exercise. So we often have to do an exercise that a lot of people are familiar with me conducting. Estimate, please, what is your own lifespan? How long do you think you might live? And many people don't want to address the question. It's an unpleasant thought. But why should it be so unpleasant? So in the Mahabharata, of course, Yajnavalkya, we now understand, he comes to a lake, it's possessed by a ghost. He's asked this question. If he doesn't answer it correctly, like his brothers, he gets turned to stone. That's the basic story. And what is the most paradoxical thing? That everybody will die except you. You alone will not die. Why? Because we don't have a wish. We don't have a death wish. We don't have this. My goal is to die. We take it as a skeleton and put it in a closet and hide it. The reality is, therefore, that if you analyze how long you are going to live in your present condition, that requires a reevaluation. Now, supposing you say, I don't know. Well, that's okay. You go to a palmist might tell you, but that's not fixed. Very often I read for fun, children and people, they show me your palm. My aim really in reading the palm is find out something that has a wonderful value, a wonderful characteristic, a good quality, and I emphasize that. Now, palmists have this thing called lifeline. They look at it. It starts, generally speaking, from the index finger, from the pointing finger, if you will, and it curves round to the bottom of your wrist, the bottom of the thumb. And if that has a few disruptions and what have you, and is not deep enough and is not strong and is disconnected, then you can predict, well, your life is going to end here, but it's not fixed. Improve your health, you can extend it. Now, if you take the average lifespan, men and women have different lifespans, let's say in Ireland, and generally women live a little longer, then you take that average and say, well, I'm attending to my health now. I expect to extend that by a few years. And this is not taking into account that you could step into traffic any moment of the day or night and your life ends. And you say, how can God, is an accompanying question, how can God allow the death of a 5-year-old or a 2-year-old, you see, as if it were the biggest tragedy on the planet? Not understanding there is a cycle, there's birth, life, and death, and nothing actually dies. So things get transformed. That's all we know. Now there is a particular kind of causation, which is apparitional causation. It looks like that. When Mr. Cohn was let go, the frogs decided poor Mr. Cohn died. Maybe they held a funeral for it. Maybe they discovered or they discussed, is it going to go to heaven? Is it going to go to hell? Is there an afterlife? Will there be a purgatory for it? Will it reincarnate? These are all useless questions. We can see that from an example. But when we are caught up into it, that caught upness is called attachment. And it's because we have a wrong reading. How do we correct our interpretation? Practice. We have to practice. We have to practice the positive qualities. And we have to learn to shift our understanding and our reading of the world and understand its impermanence. And understand that during the time when time and space and circumstances have placed us in a certain scenario, that we take advantage and do the best we possibly can and not waste our resources. How do we waste our resources? We become attached to people. We become attached to places. We become attached to animals. We become attached to houses. We become attached to a car. We even label a car a certain gender, mainly female, feminine gender. Then my Bessie is not well. Oh, sorry to hear that. Bessie? Who's Bessie? Relative? No, it's my car. So, how do we get out of this attachment is a difficult thing. And I agree with you, it's difficult. But anything difficult requires shifting our evaluation of things and practicing. What will we practice? We'll practice these noble qualities. We'll refine the mind. We need to get this knowledge which is there. Let us take, for example, a pet dog that we loved very much. We looked after it when it was sick. Then it died. Then we say, what a pity. Then we become sad for a number of days. Then we may, if we're in the mood, look for a substitute, another dog, something like that. So nobody looks for a goldfish. They all look for a dog. Difficult to take a goldfish for a walk. So we get attached to this. We never think that this life will be a passing at some stage or other, but that's the fact of it. And we can't avoid it. There are telomeres, they're kind of small threads on the DNA, and that is responsible for the relatively short life that we have. The important thing is, what will you do with that? The older you get, the more people who are cherished people disappear. What happened to so-and-so? Oh, his funeral was last week. Okay. And we never think for a moment it'll happen to ourselves. So what to do? We have to first of all acknowledge this ephemeral nature of life itself. It has to be really inserted so that this attachment goes. Now there are various devices. Now one such device, which is absolutely sewn up as a conclusion in philosophy, would be 3 states of consciousness. I encourage everybody, when they ask a question or when they make a statement, to follow it with a small phrase, in the waking state. So, in the waking state, this happened. A dog died? Yes, in the waking state. because that dog is not there in a dream, or maybe it's there in a dream. Maybe there are 1,000 dogs in a dream. And you say it's only a dream, only because you're looking at it from the waking state. But there are 3 states of consciousness. In this way, the Upanishads will help you to shift your understanding and look at things differently. And unless we look at things in a so-called non-standard way, we won't find any creative solutions to any of these problems, such as death, immortality. All of these scriptures are to do with this subject. Reality, what is reality? What is immortality? These are serious questions because we're all looking for it. Recognizing our mortality, we look for immortality. Where will you find it? And if we think we'll find it on the physical level, we'll be sorely mistaken. There's an enormous amount of research going on to see how can we extend longevity, human life longevity, number one, and do away with it altogether. And so perhaps if we freeze, if we go into the cryogenics, freeze the body, freeze the brain or something, and revive it some years later, will that do it? Well, so far, nothing's happening on it. When the body is dead, it's dead. It's made from food, that's all. Your body is made from food. It's an organic thing. It's made from food. What drives it? Earlier, I was talking to somebody a little bit about naturopathy. Naturopathy is based on the answer to some serious questions. Who is controlling from inside? These are questions brought up by Purnananda Upanishad. What is the inner controller? Something inside you is controlling all the functions of all your cells. Something is controlling the organisms necessary for me to apply vocal cords. Not only that, but that same principle is transforming the sound, the vibration in the vocal cords, and it's being sent over airwaves. It's arriving at your substation, and your ears are listening to it, picking it up, all those vibrations, which are simply vibrations, and they're coming through a complex system of organic channels into the brain, and the brain is then working out, as it were. But we talk about the brain as an independent thing, as if it has intelligence of its own. It does not. When the body dies, the brain is part of it. It dies as well with it. It's just a series of networks and so on. Just as electricity is dormant, so to speak, or seems to be, until you connect the current with something. And then you have wires of connections, and the electrons are made to go along the wire and so on. And in Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, he says, well, we don't even require the wires. He's predicting wireless communication because the waves are present everywhere. We don't just pick them up. We don't require wires. Similarly, in the human body, there is a nervous system, something like wires. And according to the yogis, there are subtle channels. These subtle channels are there, and we can use them, and we can pick them up for health purposes, or reading health purposes, or picking up the electrical polarity of it, making adjustments, and so on and so forth. So these various channels are there. But you see, they're just conducting energy. Whose energy? There's only one energy, divine energy. What we call a dog or a cat or an animal has a certain birth, has a life, and the life is shorter than human life. And human life may be even shorter than a tortoise life. And that thing dies. It doesn't continue. But there are certain organisms who go into long periods of dormancy and can be revived. Whether it's dormancy or whether it's death, we can only say that there is this cycle. And we have to acknowledge that a cycle is something that is observed from a non-cyclical thing, non-cyclical being. And that is where our first protocol is your own nature. What is your own nature? Described here. You are neither earth. What does earth mean? We are neither the organic material, which is there, and whose characteristic mainly is magnetism. We're not earth. What's the next in the category? We're not water, energetic component, electrical energy. We're not that. We're not the fluid thing. We're neither solid nor fluid. Well, the next thing, we're not radiation, we're not fire, we're not heat. None of that. Nor do we have the characteristic of air. Air is necessary, not only for breathing, but air as a kind of gaseous entity. When they say all these things, earth, air, and fire and water, they're not talking literally of these things. They're talking of qualities. So the quality of liquidity, the quality of radiation, the quality of heat, the quality of gaseous beings, the quality of plasma. And then finally, we are not the fields, the subtle fields, Akasha. It used to be that people thought everything, there was a luminiferous ether, and that was disbanded in 1905 or so. No, we do away with the luminiferous ether. We don't require it. But we replaced it by various fields. You all know that the Higgs boson was seemingly discovered, but not the Higgs field in which it operates. And so everything has a corresponding field. That is a kind of vibratory rate, a kind of energetic state. So we are not any of these things. What are we, therefore? For liberation, if you want freedom, if you want detachment, know yourself as consisting of what? Consciousness. There are two things that we cannot deny: consciousness and free will. We cannot deny these. These are self-evident in our experience. And the witness of these things, the witness of all this drama consisting of these five elements, including what we call dog, including what we call person, including what we call body, including what we call mind, including what we call behavior, everything that comes and goes like waves come and go. So in the frog example, you can say, during the duration of this cone, we were studying it, but we became very attached to this ever-creasing. We followed the lifespan of a cone. And naturally, we were very despondent and depressed when we saw him dead. And we don't know if we'll ever see that cone again. And the cone was very good, it was so well shaped. We were marveled at how it developed into such perfect circles. So the first thing we become attached to is our own bodies. We become attached to everything that is around it. We become attached to our personality, our persona. Persona means mask. So that we would want to go and do a personality development course. But the first thing that we understand is persona means a mask. It's a Greek word. They understood it. They understood that there's just something in front and something behind. There is a witness. When we deal with attention splits. We can see that attention can be directed externally. And it is under the instruction, as it were, or the restriction of time, because we can only attend to one thing at a time. But when that attention gets focused on itself, it becomes an internal self-discovery, and we see it is all consciousness itself. That is our nature. And we are not only a consciousness, but we are also the witness of the changing things. This is why scripture is so important. It tells us the things which are really obvious, but things which we bypass because we are under this delusion that this world is a permanent thing. Naturally, we get a shock when we discover, oh, it's not so permanent. It is actually impermanent. Then, of course, in practically, when we are attached to a person, the natural question is, where do they go to? Well, philosophically, it is an invalid question. But does that take away the pain? No, it doesn't. So we can be assured by other things. What are those other things? That there is a perpetuation. That person actually never dies. Body dies, no doubt. And we are attached to them because we are attached to their personality, attached to the way they look, attached to memories of the person. But you see, there was just a transformation. Now we know exactly what happens from the scripture when a person dies, and we've discussed it before. 4 avenues are there, possible avenues. But you see, the cone in the story does not have to reincarnate. It is already full. But when we are deluded ourselves, then the accumulation of our experiences perpetuates. Why? Because evolution requires a purpose. There is a direction in evolution. It requires a purpose. And that purpose has 2 aspects to it. The common purpose, the general purpose, will be the answer to these questions, the acquisition of knowledge, liberation, sense of liberation, and a sense, therefore, as a result of this passion occurs when we have this knowledge and when we have this liberation. And the solution is practice. Practice what? Practice tolerance, practice sincerity, compassion, contentment, truthfulness, like nectar. Now we can analyze each one of these things because they become the antidote to the pain. When we practice tolerance, what is tolerance? Tolerance, other words for it could be a sense of forbearance. We go through the pain, we acknowledge the pain. We don't do away with the pain, we acknowledge it is there. Bereavement is a real pain. We acknowledge its existence. We don't do away with it. What do? Sincerity. Sincerity, a kind of truthfulness. And when we practice with sincerity, that means we take it with a great deal of purity of intention. Compassion. Those who are suffering from bereavement, we have compassion for them. Detachment doesn't mean no compassion. Compassion leads toward it. Compassion because all of us are suffering. What use is, philosophy and knowledge and so on and so forth without the essential love and compassion necessary? So compassion is there. Contentment. Contentment is cultivated from gratitude. We are eternally grateful for every single second. We are grateful for the extra hour we got today. We are grateful for our life. We are grateful for our environment. We're grateful for all the resources freely supplied to us. And we are content. We don't want any more than that. It is said in mythology that the world is divided, beings are divided at their highest state of evolution. See, there are the group of the devas living in heaven, let's say. What is their problem? They have absolutely everything, but they still want more. Having got everything, they want more. They're never satisfied, even though they have everything that they require. Then the humans are suffering from the fact that they don't have enough and they want more. And then the demons, the other kind of category of person, they they want to exercise with a sense of greed. So there's an element of greed and lust involved in it. Now there's a wonderful chapter in the Bhagavad Gita which gives us a good understanding of what our conscience is already telling us, what is good, what is bad, divided into beings. So the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad will tell us that Prajapati, the Lord of all creatures, brought into existence two types of children. These were the Devas and the other one was the Asuras. Two polar opposites. And so, in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we are told that these two types exist. And then there's a brief mention also in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as well. The 12th verse. The nature of what is called the Rakshasas and the Asuras, two different categories of demons, if you will. They would describe what are they? They're not separate people. They're people of vain hopes and vain actions, people without discrimination. We have to have that discernment, that discrimination. And then, of course, in the 16th chapter, we have a more detailed description of these two types. Those with a divine nature, it's not a separate group of people, but those with a divine nature and those with the nature of demons. Any discerning, studying student of this will quickly feel that we have to wholeheartedly accept the divine nature and totally reject the characteristics of its opposite, surely. So if the demonic nature is presented as an attribute of some living person manifesting in the visible, then its avoidance becomes possible, its avoidance becomes easy. Now we can see from ancient stories, even contemporary stories of holy people and saints, that there is an obvious division. Those people who have suffering from this attachment and creating a behavior that matches it, we have an instinct, a conscience that says we should not be like that, surely. There are enough examples of that in the world. So we have the symbolization of gods and demons, respectively. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita mentions over a dozen qualities that characterize divine nature. And we should pay attention to that and study that. One of them, of course, is steadfastness. Steadfastness in the practice. Steadfast in knowledge, steadfast in the practice, which we call yoga, a spiritual practice. And knowledge here, of course, means the clear understanding of things like the internal self. That's what we have to be convinced of. The conviction of this Atman, this divine nature, which is you. Every teacher emphasizes it. Jesus emphasizes it. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Emphasizes, be perfect as your Father in heaven. Emphasizes this inheritance that we have. This divine self which is you and which is yours. It's all taught in every scripture, and it's taught by every teacher. Yoga means getting direct perception of this. And fortitude, which we've mentioned, is another virtue that is also mentioned. So it stands for the mental state which removes the exhaustion of the body and the senses when they droop down. And so we can re-energize ourselves by upholding these. No more feeling weak or dull. We should not feel weak, we should not feel dull. We should not have a false kind of energy. We should not have depression. Now we can say don't have these things, but how do we lift ourselves from it? If we fall into these conditions, we have to cultivate the opposite. The opposite is strength. And the strength is inner strength. And inner strength comes from inner conviction. So the extreme materialists will be those of demonic nature. And we are mild materialists. If we suffer from bereavement, never mind, we can get over it. It's a kind of weakness. So what do the materialists believe in? They believe that the universe has no law to regulate it. Self-regulating somehow, with no explanation. Holding such views, what will we say? These people have limited, small intellect, not really looking at it. And then even worse are fierce deeds to dominate the world, creating wars. The things that we read about on the news every day. These rise as the enemies of the world for its destruction. We can clearly see this in every news article, in every day. And these people often boast that enemy has been slain by me, others also I shall slay, let's say tomorrow. I am the Lord, I enjoy these kinds of things. I am successful, I'm strong, I'm healthy. Who is there equal to me? We find these kinds of internal scripts from such people. But we can change that, our own kind of internal monologue. They know I'm the immortal Atman, I'm strong, nothing can defeat this because I was never born. I'm never living, I'm not dying. I'm the eternal one, playing this drama out and understanding the nature of birth, life, and death. So that's all I would say about that. Interesting subject, because it's something everybody is concerned about. And yet Scripture is giving us this answer, and our own meditation on our own change of our behavior, that is our reactions to a reinterpreted world. This is all divine. There's nothing that is not divine in this world.
Thank you, Swami.
Oh.
It's, I suppose it's like knowing all that, but it's practicing, as you say, you know.
Yes. So Ramakrishna gave this wonderful, simple example. Some people have heard about milk, let's say the divine, let's say a God. Some people have seen it, but the real people of understanding have tasted it. Only when you taste the divine will that conviction come. You go along until you manage to do it. We often find wonderful, wonderful remedies to all of these from people who have risen above the gross plane. And there's a book which we often refer to, Meditation and Spiritual Life by Swami Yatishwarananda. Yatishwarananda was vice president of the Ramakrishna order, and he had this wonderful experience because he had the best teacher. He had Swami Brahmananda, direct disciple of Ramakrishna. And as we know, Swami Brahmananda would have been known and befriended by Sister Nivedita. So Brahmananda, a great realized soul, anybody who gets the chance to read The Eternal Companion, his biography and teachings, that would be a worthwhile book to get. Anyway, some practical suggestions he has in this very book. And I have to watch the time also. Oh, okay, we're a little over time, so I'll only refer to it very briefly. So he says, first rise from the gross plane to the plane of thought, and then try to rise to the spiritual plane. Before coming in touch with higher spiritual currents, the lower currents in us must be neutralized. When the lower vibrations are too strong, chant the divine name with great vigor and tenacity. Very simple remedy. We call this japa. Our atmosphere is full of sound vibrations from various sources. These affect us even without our knowledge. If you listen to the music from a radio, you can differentiate the effects of various types of music on you. Some music elevates you, Some makes you restless, some just drives you mad. Learn to counteract bad music through bhajan, holy chanting, holy texts. These two simple recommendations are really wonderful. So lovingly chant the name of God all the time. Use that to elevate the vibration of the mind, elevate your thought. Very often I say change your thinking. How? Continuously chant the beautiful name of God with feeling and meaning. And secondly, you can elevate the mood very quickly through music. His keen observation, if you switch on in his day radio and you hear different kinds of music, then you'll see one kind of music drives you. I came across a person who is involved in sales. He's a salesman. He says, I am a very successful salesman. How do I do it? When I drive to a potential client, I put the radio on, or whatever it was, maybe a CD player, and at full volume, I play aggressive music. Something like rock music or something. So we know, of course, that every time you listen to something, it affects your mood directly. And that is why we have hymns. That's why we have bhajans. That's why we have chanting, Gregorian chant, for example. Or in the Eastern Orthodox Church, there are the various ecclesiastical chanting that is going on. And that is why the Vedas are chanted. There's a musical lyricism to them. The Gita is actually a song. And so when we chant the Gita, there's a certain lyricism to it. So good music, Beethoven, I highly recommend. Right. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.